What's going on, everybody? Mike here from Ace Garage. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have another episode on our 1996 Integra GSR with just 60,000 miles, and we bring this car back to OEM. On the last episode, we went ahead to remove the aftermarket engine mount along with the intake manifold, throttle body, and intake system, and everything all back to OEM. On today's episode, we'll be doing some maintenance and some repair, and John's gonna tell you guys a little bit more about it.
So now that we've really, I think everything is back to stock, now we could start with our maintenance. We noticed we got some oil leaks here and little oil leaks here. And also Mike was pointing out, like, this belt, this is an older style belt, and that's making us think, if this belt's that old, how old is our timing belt? So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna go ahead and start the maintenance side of this whole thing, because what good is the car being beautiful and low mileage if the maintenance isn't up to date? These are interference motors, so we want to make sure that if that timing belt is old, it's changed, because if it breaks, we're gonna have to do a head job. So let's go ahead and we're gonna pull this thing apart and see what kind of spark plugs, what our timing belt looks like, check our valves, and replace all the seals that we find in there.
Now guys, that is a 60,000 miles motor.
So you can tell this motor's definitely been taken care of. We only have some light golding to the inside of the aluminum. If you see one of these where someone hasn't changed the oil on time, you would see a very dark gold or almost a brown inside here. But we can see everything looks really good, and as Mike was mentioning, this is definitely the original valve cover gasket, but the valve cover gasket is still soft and pliable. It's not hard and stiff because the car has been taken care of. The valve cover gaskets will get stiff when you don't change your oil regularly, and then the oil starts to eat up this rubber. So this thing is beautiful. Everything's here. We only had a little bit of seeping from here.
Now talk about that, John. Let's move on to the timing belt. I mean, what do you think? Original belt or replacement?
My money's on original. It definitely looks pretty original to me. We can see some of the lettering on here. Not a whole lot. The engine is not on TDC. We just took it apart, but this has definitely never been taken apart again. This will be the first B-Series model, other than your Type R motor from the ITR project that we got from H Motors, that I've been in, that's a complete virgin. It's never been touched. And this thing looks beautiful.
That is super wear in 2022.
Oh yeah.
All right, so next up, what do you think we should do, John?
I think it's time to, well, we're gonna do the timing belt. So let's start breaking everything down to get us ready to replace. I think we have all the parts on order. They should be here within the day or so. And what we'll start doing is taking our power steering fluid out. We're gonna remove our power steering pump. We're also gonna remove all the other dry belts. We'll remove the side mount and set this thing on TDC. We're gonna get this all ready for a timing belt. But before then, if we want, since the engine's cold, we can go ahead and do our valve adjustment now. Then we can replace everything when those parts come in. So let's start taking her apart. 1972, baby. This thing is definitely all original. You can see the cracking on it, it's dried out. It's still in good condition, but this here, a little bit of water on here, it's gonna cause this thing to slip. So we're gonna replace the drive belts. We're gonna go ahead and remove the power steering pump. We just had these last 2 bolts on. We'll put a glove over this so we don't get fluid everywhere. Then we'll tuck it to the side and keep on taking things apart. All right, so we took our power steering belt out, and when we look down here at our AC compressor tensioner and belt here, we notice our bolt is here. So there's normally a long threaded bolt that comes in through here with a nut on it, and that allows you to set the tension on this tensioner right here for the AC compressor. Either somebody lost it or they didn't tighten the nut on it and it backed out. We're gonna see if we can't source that. If not, we can still tighten it without it, but we'd like to have it there. So we're gonna go ahead and keep removing our belts. We're gonna take our AC belt, then we'll take our alternator belt, then we'll work on taking off the side mount and all the rest of the covers. Yeah, that's pretty intense.
Wow.
You know, when it's that loose, I think you can even pull the damn thing off.
I think you can.
Yeah, so another side of a timing belt is not only that it gets dry, but it gets stretched out. And when the timing belt gets stretched out, it may not skip the timing, but it's more likely to skip the timing. But another thing it does is it throws your ignition timing off, and you will end up having to adjust your distributor a whole lot. If we take a look over here, the distributor is advanced quite a bit, and that could be because this timing is so loose. So this is another signal that it's definitely time to change this belt. Good thing we're in here. We'll probably end up changing the crank seal while we're down there. And I think other than that, I mean, it's looking good. Let's keep taking this thing apart. All right, so you can see here, we have our 2 marks lined up there. Our arrows are pointing up, and down there, we are on our separate mark, the white mark, right on the crank pulley. And that lets us know that we are on TDC number 1. That means top dead center of compression stroke on number 1 cylinder. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one's all the way up, both valves closed. Now that's also the setting you need it in order to do your valve adjustment. So you can see there, oh yeah, we got some play. We got some play on these, so we'll definitely be doing the valve adjustment probably after this. I know I can see that the exhausts have a little bit more play than the intake. So now that we have this set on TDC, we can go down, remove our crank pulley, pull our covers off, and swap this belt out. Are we gonna do the water pump too?
Oh yeah, we gotta do everything.
All right, perfect. So this thing will be 100%. So now we have our harmonic balancer, or AKA crank pulley off. And this is the key. It fits in the keyway, and that's what locks it into its specific position on the crank. This is a harmonic balancer because there is actually a rubber insert here, and what a lot of people don't understand is when you put like a lightweight crank pulley, you are eliminating the harmonic balancer. That's why, like on TJ's car and my car, we put the ATI dampener. That adds extra dampening in there to remove all extra vibrations from the engine. This is a very important part. This part here is the washer. The washer has a smooth side and a convex side and a concave side, is what I should say. What this does is it helps keep the belt in line. On a previous video, we had a Integra in here, and that had this put on backwards. What that tends to do is eat up the whole side of the belt. This one was installed right. It's just a good rule of thumb to make sure this is always installed in the proper orientation. So let's go ahead and pull this off. Me and Mike were just looking at it. You can't see it too good right now, but we'll get off, you'll see better. There's all the grease is coming out of this bearing, and we were having some kind of noise over here, so we're gonna take it off and see if maybe that's our failure. All right, so this belt is in decent condition. It's definitely old and we know it's stretched. I mean, it looks like it's all original. Everything else has been original. Most of the lettering's worn off of it. This one, we can see it's not actually cracking or anything when we stretch it. So this one looks like it probably wouldn't have failed, but it was definitely gonna skip because even when we turned it over, it was skipping a tooth. So now that we got this off, all we gotta do is take our water pump off and change whatever seals we're gonna do. I think we might do a crank seal on here. We're not gonna change the seal behind the oil pump here because it's not leaking, and we don't wanna take the oil pan off. That's what you gotta do to do it. So we'll probably just end up changing our crank seal and our water pump right here, which is all original as well.
All right, before we put back the distributors, go ahead and remove the Vtec solenoid. There's a couple of gaskets there. Good time for us to take it off and get them replaced at the same time. All right, so we got the distributor off, and one thing that we want to do, we're gonna go ahead and change out this distributor O-ring right over here. It's all done.
All right, so here's our cam gear. And unlike aftermarket cam gears, this is fixed at the standard setting, whatever the timing is on here. And then they use this half moon key that fits into a groove on the cam, which corresponds to this groove here, and that's what locks everything into place. So you really want to make sure you don't lose this. You can buy them new, but losing it's going to put you in a tough spot. And you just want to really make sure that you don't drop it when you take it out. So we pulled this out because what we're going to do now is we're going to replace this little seal at the end, the cap. We're going to go ahead and remove the cams, and we want to just take a look at the entire motor. We're going to inspect the LMAs, the lost motion assemblies, and like I said, we're going to change these cam seals behind here, and it's easier to change them once you remove this plastic cover, which you got to take the cam gear off. So let's get the cover off and then pull the cams out. All right, so we got our oil plates off. What those do is they push oil, run oil, I should say, through the whole system here, through these orifices. Then we have these pieces here. You can see they're labeled E12, I12. So we're going to start with intake, and then our first bolts here. Then we have 2, 3, 4, and then our pieces here. So it's really hard to mix these up, especially these, because they really can't go anywhere else. But you always want to make sure these are right, because right here, this is our oil orifice. This is where oil comes up from the oil pump into the head through our Vtec assembly. And without this O-ring, you're never going to get Vtec, and you may mess up your motor. So it's very important to see this. This one kind of transferred over onto here. It's hard. We may want to see about going ahead and replacing this O-ring. It's a good thing to do. It's really flat. These are usually blue, but they sit right there. All right, so now we have the cams out. You can take a look at our rockers here. You have 3 lobes here, 3 rockers, I should say. We have 2 valves, and what we have underneath here, you can see, is this piece here. That's called a LMA, or a lost motion assembly. What it does is when the engine is normally running out of Vtec, it takes the slack up from this. So when the lobe goes by onto here, it just pushes down and it keeps constant tension, so this lobe is always touching the cam. There's no valve adjustment on the center one because it is spring loaded, so that it doesn't need adjustment. On some cars, this is hydraulically pressurized, and that does fail at times. There are upgraded ones. Some people put the NSX ones, they're spring driven. But in order to get those out, you have to remove the rods that hold this all into place. You slide them out this end over here, and then you can remove the LMAs. You can see that this is all original valve train, original springs and retainers. That's how they look. The only car that came dual in the B series was the Type R. These are all single spring, non-titanium or anything like that, because the Type R revved higher, so they did, I believe it was on the intake. I think only intake had dual valve springs. What some tricks people used to do back in the, I remember when we were younger and we would put Type R cams in our I had a GSR, we would get Type R inner springs and put them on the exhaust side and all that stuff so we could rev it, because we were too cheap to go out and buy real race car stuff. So Honda always had their little tips and tricks to squeak horsepower out. But all in all, what you want to look for when you take a motor apart here is you want to look for wear on these rockers. Because unlike a K-Series motor that uses a roller rocker, this uses a direct contact. And this is the little adjustment for the valve lash. So everything in here looks really good. Like I said, we did have a little noise. Me and Mike are thinking that it might be inside the distributor. So he was talking about taking the beauty out of the garage and maybe swapping the distributor from his Type R on here just so we can check for noise. I mean, I don't know if I could do that, but I'll let Mike take his own car apart. But this thing so far, everything looks beautiful, man. So all of our parts finally showed up here. We have these 2 O-rings that go on the 2 pins that hold the rails inside the head for the rockers in place. I remember you had told us.
Oil controls.
Yes, and then we have our O-ring in the middle. This is the orifice that sends I believe the oil back up or returns into the head. We have our crank seal, our cam seals, our cam plug. We have a few O-rings here that are going to stop the leaks. We're not fully rebuilding the power steering pump, but we're going to stop where it's leaking out of it, and we have 1 hose as well. That's all that was available. All Honda dry belts, timing belt, tensioner, which TJ pointed out to us from his previous video. This is probably the source of our sound, but I don't know if I trust him yet. And we have a water pump that I owed Mike that I guess I have to pay for it because I took one of his, so. But this should this should be all the parts we need in order to put everything back together and stop all of our leaks. We already rebuilt the Vtec solenoid, so Miguel's gonna come over, he's gonna give us a hand on this because when it comes time to B-Series, OG is the OG.
Somewhat.
Yeah, it's all right, it's all right.
So who's the K-Series OG?
I don't know.
All right, so these are the oil controls that are in the head. They also align the rocker arm that the shafts sit on. Very simple to get out. You need a 8mm thread bolt. These are threaded internally. So we're just gonna rock this guy in here. That's it, just held in by an O-ring. Always good to have a good O-ring here. So there's two different styles here. You'll see how this one has a higher receding end on it. This one's flat. The flat one always goes on the intake side. So we're gonna take this bad boy right here, push her down, this one, and just like that, we're good to go.
So I don't know exactly what this is called, but I do know if you don't have that O-ring in there, you will not get Vtec on your motor. What this is, I believe this is the oil fill into the head for the rockers, and these are the returns, I believe.
Yeah.
So without that, you will not be able to engage Vtec because you'll have a lack of oil pressure for everything to work. It's a relatively cheap thing, and every time I pull these rockers off, that cap, I try to replace that O-ring. All right, so we have our cam off. This is our intake cam. It's slotted for the distributor, and so you can tell these rings also signify that there is a GSR cam. And here's our old cam seal. We'll pop this guy off. Miguel's gonna slide this one on. You wanna take your time when you put it on and make sure you do not roll the lip of it over. Once you have it on there, we can go ahead and set it in place. Just like that. And we'll do it one more time. Then we'll start assembling the rest of the head. And we got number 4 here. That goes right in place there.
Follow the O-ring.
This is our middle one that accepts the O-ring. Always making sure the arrows are pointing this way. Then we'll put our last 2 caps on. This is the cap that holds our cam seal. So right on this surface right here, that's where the valve cover rides. Right there and right here, we have to put a little bit of Honda Bond. Miguel's doing it right now on this one. Doesn't take too much. I'll trade you. And just like Miguel was saying before, this is recessed more on the exhaust side to accept that higher little dowel there. Make sure our seal's in place properly. Looks good. So you don't have to put Honda Bond on here, but a little Honda Bond never hurt no one. Once this gets lined up like that, this pretty much, it just snaps right into place. Oh, man. So I wanted to see if Miguel knew off the top of his head. Hey Miguel, what's the torque specs on the head?
This is on the cylinder head?
Well, on this.
No, on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. On what we're working on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this 20 foot-pounds.
Oh, you. Oh.
I've taken these off a few times.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of sticks, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
But those are.
I think these are like real low.
I think
like
they're seven.
Yeah. Like
they're 7 foot-pounds.
Yeah.
So those we don't have to worry about till the very end.
Yeah.
So those you torque with these guys. So he's going to go around here, starting from the inside, working his way out. That's how you always want to torque aluminum stuff like this.
Yeah.
So you can see if someone was using an impact gun on here, they would definitely over tighten these, and these bolts are soft. They're not hardened. So you don't want them to snap off on you. Mike, you don't like it when I say techie. Whoa! Yeah! Oh! All right, so we're gonna put the water pump in. There are 2 bolts that are longer. It's this one, and the rest are the same. So we have those 2 to the side. Let's go ahead and put this in. So now it's time to put our crank seal on. Here's our crank seal. You see these crank seals, they're a little different. They're reinforced with this little metal here, unlike any of the other seals. But fortunately, Miguel has the 4-piston rooster ring that he bought. You asked what a rooster ring is? Why don't you use your imagination? I think there's other names for use of a rooster. But so what this does is it sits over this, and it makes a perfect taper so that when you put the crank seal on, when you slide it over here, it doesn't roll the lip over. It makes installation of this crank seal so much better. Since it's Miguel's ring, I don't know why he has it. You know, I'm gonna let him use it.
My rooster?
It's your rooster ring.
Okay.
So what Miguel's doing right now is he's sealing the seal. They have seal drivers that make this process a little easier, but there is never a replacement for a nice 3/8 socket, or I should say extension, and a hammer. This is how most of us do it, and all what we're trying to do is make sure that it's flush with the power, I should say the oil pump, and that's what he's doing. Just lightly tapping it in evenly all the way around. All right, so after using Miguel's rooster ring to install the seal, we are gonna go ahead and put our crank gear in. We already have our keyway in place, our key in the keyway, I should say. And this is our crank position sensor. So what Miguel's doing right now is making sure that our marks are lined up in the middle. We're already on our mark at the bottom, and we're gonna go ahead and put the new timing belt on. I'm gonna snake it past the mount. If you wanna catch the bottom, you always wanna start on the bottom and work your way towards your tensioner. So what I did before is when I installed the tensioner, I put it in its fully loose position and then tighten the bolt. So it's easy to put the time belt on. Now I'm gonna loosen the tensioner bolt and it should take up our slack. Just like that. So now there's the factory procedure for setting the tension is to rotate it. We'll put the bolt back in the bottom. I like to move the slack here. Make sure that bolt's loose. Then we'll go ahead and tighten it like that, right, Miguel?
Yep. Daddy likes.
Very good looking.
Oh yeah, Daddy likes.
This is very good. So when you do a timing belt, especially on a stock motor and anything that's not a full race motor, you want to do it the factory way. You don't want to put extra force on that tensioner and make the belt tighter than it's supposed to be. Miguel here has run into that problem a couple of times.
Yeah.
He used to crank down on his tensioner because, you know, we're high revving the motors, but also using a stock belt. The combination of too much torque on the belt and stock belt leads to premature failure. And I think even within a year or so, he had his time belt not rip, but it sheared the teeth off of the belt.
Yeah, because as the cam stretches, everything warms up in the head, the belt gets tighter, the belt gets hotter. If this is too tight, you can score
your
the
cam
head
as well,
too.
There's a thrust spec to the cams, how much side-to-side movement they have. All that can be put out of spec if you have too much tension on here. Heck, you could even snap off the end of the cam gear. We've seen that happen before.
Yeah.
And where the cam itself actually breaks, where the bolt goes in. This is set the way we need to be. All we have to do now is do our valve adjustment. Once our valve adjustment is done, we'll go ahead and put all the covers back on, reseal our power steering pump, and get this baby back on the road so that Mike can feel the Vtec, because that's what real power is.
Oh man.
It's Vtec.
This is Vtec.
This is Vtec. As you can see, we're in Florida. It got real loud in here. It's pouring down rain. 5 minutes ago it was sun. South Florida for you. All right, so what we're gonna do here, I wouldn't necessarily call it a rebuild. We're gonna reseal what's leaking on it. We have a seal here. We have one seal that goes behind here and also a seal that goes underneath this. So we're gonna start by removing this back one here and then just swapping that seal out. So let's see. Ooh. Wasn't really expecting that. So that's the big seal on the back. I'm not gonna lie, it's the first time I've ever taken apart one of these pumps. Wasn't expecting it to, oh man, it's getting loud out there. Wasn't expecting it to pop out like that, but since it already did, we're good with that. So now we're just gonna move on to this seal here. All right, so we're ready for our valve adjustment. And in this shop, if a B-series valve adjustment is going down, Miguel's involved. Best valve adjustments, hand down. I'm gonna give you that one, bro.
Thank you.
I haven't really seen Mike's valve adjustment, so I can't judge him, but I know personally, if I had to get valve adjustment.
We've had some quiet ones.
Yeah, he puts in work. I know when I'm been beaten when he takes it down. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna remove the spark plugs. It just makes it easier to turn the engine over. So, because on every compression stroke, we kind of gotta fight through that compression. And we have the engine already set to TDC. And we have our ratchet on the crank pulley, so we're gonna turn it over and we're gonna show you the procedure for this. It's real simple. It's 7 thousandths on the intake and 8 thousandths on the exhaust. That is our gap in between the rocker and the cam, and that's gonna be TDC on each cylinder, top dead center. Start on number 1, and whatever comes up next in the series, there's a whole firing order to it. We'll do it. So let's start by doing it, and when we got the master OG on it, it's gonna come out beautiful. Like I said before, we have it at 7 thousandths or 1.78 millimeters, or excuse me, 0.178 millimeters. And these are, I don't know if they're new or not, but they just showed up on the Snap-on truck, and they're nice little holders for it. You know, rule of thumb, we try not to do the valve adjustment with the feeler gauge on the whole mess of them because you don't get a good feel for the drag. But having this on its own like this, and being able to get this part gets oily and this will stay dry now with your hand. I think this might work out a little better. This is our first time trying it out. And like I said, the master OG over here, he's gonna get it done.
Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're checking the clearance, like John said, between here. That will allow for expansion of the cams, the rockers with heat, and also oil, very important. So this is 8 thousandths on the exhaust side. And basically what we're doing is we're going in and we're gonna feel for a slight drag, okay?
Which I see it there pretty good.
That feels pretty good to me. You don't want it to be too tight, nor do you want it to be too loose. So the nice little drag on this is money.
You tell this motor was taking really good care of, man. This is
Bro,
beautiful. I see it.
See it?
I don't have to feel it to see that bump, man. That thing looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Didn't he come down some?
We good.
Oh, bro, I don't even think this thing's gonna need anything adjusted.
60,000 miles.
So we went through number 1 exhaust and intake, and they were perfect on the money. I don't feel any need to adjust these. That's passing for me.
Yeah.
Looked good, right?
Yeah, it looks good to me. I didn't even have to see it. I could tell from that little bump that it was making on the way out.
Yeah.
So, and that goes right with the fact that I don't know if valve adjustment's ever been checked on this car previously. I mean, by time, we usually don't do valve adjustments.
Yeah.
We usually do valve adjustments based off of mileage because that accounts for wear. So
60,000 miles.
this thing's still pretty crispy. Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We'll show you how we get to our next cylinder.
So bring these to like 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we set it to the next cylinder. Seeing as these have 4 spokes to it, and the first one we had lined up with our arrows pointing up and the marks facing in, now we line up our next marks that pop up. Our next spoke on this lines up with the spoke over here. This means we're on TDC on our next cylinder. And which cylinder is that, Miguel?
3.
So if you come over here, you can see the cams are facing away from the lifters, I should say, on both. That means we are open for compression strokes. So that means that's our next cylinder. Money. This is the easiest valve adjustment yet.
Yep.
But checking your valve lash, which is really what this is.
Very important.
It's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it is literally a metal on metal contact. There's a thin layer of oil that's there, but there's wear associated with the cams. I know we were looking at this when we had the cams out before, and there's no shiny spots on the high point lobe of the cam. That's letting us know we don't have much wear. So let's just keep on checking. Now you're a real doctor with these tools, Miguel.
Couldn't have done these valve clearance any better.
Oh, 60,000 original miles on here. You know, you're on these older cars, you take it at its word on the mechanical cluster because people can swap clusters and everything like that. But every time we dip into this engine a little deeper, it keeps showing us that this thing's definitely been a very well cared for motor and legitimate low miles. And I mean, how do you feel about it? You're the one who did it.
I believe so too, man. The head's clean. It looks like the oil's been serviced regularly. The clearance were all on point. Like you said, when we had the cams out, I mean, even the head doesn't even look like cams turned in it, you know? So
this is definitely
someone
crispy.
did her good. Someone did her good.
I would say overall, this was a really good pickup. I mean, as advertised, beautiful car. And we're just gonna change out the valve cover gaskets, throw a couple more seals into our power steering pump and get this thing together. She'll be burning gas in just a little bit.
So here, this is a harness that goes along back here onto our Vtec solenoid, but like most of these cars in these age and condition, these clips break. And it's kind of sucks because this is kind of what holds it onto the car and makes it everything look clean. But Mike has found these. Are these back order or special parts, or how did you find them?
They're available, regular,
okay.
yeah.
So yeah, so okay, but a little pricey, but well worth having, I feel.
Takes 4 people to
Team
install
effort,
this.
you know, team effort.
All right, so we're in our final run of this here. We're gonna go ahead and slap the distributor on. Miguel just did the Vtec solenoid, and we'll do our valve cover. I think we're gonna order some new spark plugs, but we're gonna start up on the old ones, which are the original ones, Nippon Denzos. I don't even think you can get those anymore. But so that we're in the home stretch right now. So now we're at our final piece, which is the valve cover. And we have a new valve cover gasket right here. And this is these go back order, discontinued sometimes. It all depends, because normally you can get this separate, but this is the full kit. And it comes with your valve cover gasket, your spark plug seals, and all the valve cover grommets new. You can still always get these things separate, but sometimes this kit goes unavailable or back ordered. Luckily, of course, Mike's got all the good stuff because that's what he does. And we're gonna go ahead and put this on. And then when we go to put on the car, we have to put Honda Bond on the head in these 4 locations right here. That's the factory standard for it. It also helps the gasket seal in that tight corner so you don't have any oil leaks. So we're gonna go ahead and put the gaskets on and get everything put on the car. So another thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and replace the air filter. I don't think it's that dirty, but we're going to go through it and do it anyways. Another thing we realized when we got everything all together, a couple of the bolts were missing on here. Well, we went ahead and got some new ones, so we're going to go ahead and throw those in now. So now it's time to put our coolant in, and we like to use this. This coolant funnel does a good job of making this the highest point on the car. If this is the highest point, that means all the air will bleed up into here. Some of these cars, not so much on these GSRs and the newer ones, but the older ones like my DA, it was always at a lower point, so they would have bleed screws in different places. This is what we use every day in the shop whenever we do any kind of work on the cooling system. This works awesome. They're cheap and they're worth every penny, especially K-Series. K-Series are a pain to bleed. This makes life a lot easier. So we're gonna go ahead and fill it up. All right, so now we're gonna get the car started up. We're gonna check over all our work, see if we were able to solve that noise or not, or if we gotta diagnose it farther. We're also gonna bleed our coolant out and check our power steering fluid level. So let's start up and see what we got. All right, so as you can hear, our noise is gone. And that was really our main goal for doing all the maintenance. It was a weird noise. It started over here. We could hear it there. In the end, it turned out to be our timing belt idler tensioner deal over there. Yeah. And I think Miguel's valve adjustment, that was the defining moment on this entire thing.
That was spot on, dude.
Yo,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh, man.
The OG strikes again.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, so we're gonna let this thing purge out all the air out of the system. Then we'll go take her for a spin. We were talking about maybe rechecking the timing and then making sure everything's right on point. So I'm happy with it.
Sounds beautiful.
And absolutely. You know, after taking this thing from modified back to stock again, only people like us and Mike and Acura Honda Classic, that's what we do, you know?
Yep.
We'll make your car stock and beautiful again.
All right, guys, we're in the final stretch here. We got two more things we gotta finish. We wanna go ahead and get an oil change done. And also, the spark plug just came in. So let's go ahead and knock these two things out and we're all done here. All right, guys, just like that, we're all done with all of the maintenance on this B18C1 engine. Let's do a quick recap and see what we have done so far. We start off replacing the timing belt, all of the dry belts, the water pump, and also fix all of the oil leaks, the O-ring, and the gasket on this B18C1 engine. Then we'll show you guys step by step how to check and adjust the valve clearance. Then we finish off with just a simple tune-up and a simple oil change. Now in the next episode, we'll be removing the transmission and show you guys step by step how to replace the clutch and also the clutch master and slave cylinder. You definitely don't want to miss the next episode. Definitely subscribe to the channel and also turn the notification. My name is Mike, behalf of AC Garage. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you guys next week.